So good morning. Hi, Nikki. Today we're finally going to start a new unit. We finished the Psukei Zimra unit. We're moving to the Shema unit, and today we're going to be using the Koren Sidur. We are on page. We'll start in 87. If you'll see in 87, in the bottom of 87, we have the Hafkadish. Just mentioning that the Hafkadish, as we discussed many times before, all forms of Kaddish, but specifically the Hafkadish is used to separate different units of Tefillah, and so kind of to mark the fact that we're moving from Psukei Zimra to the Shema section, and it means that it has ramifications. We are transitioning by marking it, marking with a half Kaddish. Okay, then we go into the Baruch on page 89. Couple of things. About the Baruch. So I said it before, the Baruch is basically getting people's attention, right? Today it's very common to see people in shul like on their phone or whatever, right? Not on Shabbos, okay, but during the week. So, but what does it mean? Oh, they're there, like, physically they're there. I don't know, they're mentally they're there. I have no idea. We're not dealing with that too much, but it's interesting to know that that concept goes all the way to the Talmud. And the Talmud has a discussion about somebody who is in the Tefillah, in the Beit Knesset, but he's asleep. Can you count that person for a minyan? Okay. So the Baruch Hu is kind of to make sure we have a minyan. And minyan is not only 10 people, it's 10 people for the purpose of tefillah. They're there for the purpose of tefillah. It's not necessarily that everybody's going to be davening the whole thing. Like, for example, let's assume that there's 8 or 9 people. And you have 2 people that are from the previous minyan. Sometimes it happens, so they say, do you mind staying a little bit longer? I say, okay, fine. But the fact that they're there, it means that they're for the purpose of tefillah. They already fulfilled their obligation. They already daven. However, they're there for the purpose of tefillah, not their own tefillah of others, but it's still for the purpose of tefillah. Okay, so if I'm okay, let's assume that there's 9 people here davening, so they don't have a minyan. I walked in, and I'm there to fix the bookcase, and I have no intentions of answering amen. I have no intentions of being part of the minyan. The fact that I'm over bar mitzvah, it's not going to make any difference. We don't really practice that, but in theory, that's the way it's supposed to be. You're there, that means mentally you're there. Okay? Okay. So the Baruch Hu is very interesting because it's kind of call to action. And the Chazan start, bless the Lord, the Blessed One. And we respond, bless the Lord, the Blessed One, forever and all time. And then the Chazan repeats that. Okay? Why the Chazan repeats that? To show that he is he is also there. Because he calls, hey, who is with me? And they say, everybody is here. And they say, you know what? I'm here too. Okay? Interesting. We use a lot of Baruch Hu, Mevorach, right? It's the same shoresh of bracha, right? It's the same shoresh of bracha. And this is why it's appropriate to start Birkot Kriyat Shema. That's the brachot of Kriyat Shema that we're starting here. So this is kind of the beginning of that. Okay, so after the Baruch Hu, we start really the next page, 89. The bottom of 89, we have the beginning of the bracha of the first bracha before the Shema. And as I mentioned, in the morning, we have two brachot before the Shema, and we have one bracha after the Shema. Yeah? Okay. So the first bracha is Yotzer Or. Yotzer Or. We say Yotzer Or, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. That's the regular formula. Blessed are you, Lord, our God, King of the universe. Okay, we're familiar with that. That's nothing new here. Here we have adaptation of pasuk from Isaiah. Yotzer Or uboreh choshech, oseh shalom uboreh et hakol. Who forms light and creates darkness, makes peace and creates all. Now, if you look at Isaiah, you'll see that it's a different pasuk. The last word is uboreh et ha-ra, evil, not kol. I'm going to talk about it in a second. You know what? Let's talk about that. No, not Zechariah. It's Yeshaya. Yeshaya is not no. He said, Ani Hashem. That's part of one of his nevuot, one of his prophecies. He said, Ani Hashem asiti, yotzer or uboreh choshech, oseh shalom uboreh et hara. God says, I've created all. Choshech and dark, light and darkness, peace and evil. Why did the Chachamim decide to change that? No. I mean, yes, but it's nice, but there's something actually much more than that. Well, that's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. So what happens? During that time, we're talking about what we call dualism, or the other religions in the world that believed in multiple gods. And the idea was very simple. If you say that God is all good, that means there's got to be another God that is bad. Come Judaism and say, no. Hashem did everything. So how does it work if God is all good, that there is evil? So the classic explanation is that it is that we perceive as evil. God is all good, but there's only one God. And God is the one that created what we call evil, darkness, whatever, all that kind of stuff. Now, to make sure that everybody understands that, and that's the clear message, the rabbis took that word ra, evil, and replaced it with hakol. God created everything. And everything is kind of like, okay. Fast forward, by the way, like 1,000+ years, more than 1,000, to the Reform movement. Reform movement decided that they don't believe in the resurrection from the dead. And so, at least not in the simple understanding the way we understand that. And therefore what? They replaced in the Amidah, אתה גיבור לעולם השם מחיה מתים, אתה הרב להושיע, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים, ברוך אתה השם מחיה. We said it's all about, right? God revived the dead. They replaced it with the word hakol. אתה גיבור לעולם השם מחיה hakol, אתה הרב להושיע. So basically, they didn't create anything new. They just replaced, and they based on something that was already over 1,000 years old, actually close to 2,000-year-old practice.
So what is Bchira Chopshit? everybody has bechira חופשית.
Correct. So
God gave him the ability to have.
correct. We say, "Hakol b'idei shamayim."
The person
It's always God. It's always God. But within, God gives you the freedom to choose to make right choices versus wrong choices.
Where does it say that God is good? Who says God?
No,
Okay, so
it's the other religions. Correct, but Judaism at that point is fighting those other religions, and it's a clear message that we believe in one God. We do, but it's a statement. We say that statement. I'm sorry? That God is all good? Because God is all good. Oh, where do we get this idea? I don't know. No, I don't know.
he made it,
We-
he made the animals.
Correct.
That's the choice.
Correct. Okay, let's move on. Okay, what is it, the theme that we were talking about in this bracha? We kind of like spoke about that when we discussed Shabbat. What is the theme? The theme is nature, luminaries, laws of physics, call it, whatever, right? The fact that the sun comes out every day, you have the stars, you have the night, you have the day, all that stuff. Or light represent what? Renewal, right? It's a new day, it's renewal, it's symbol of life. And it is associated with goodness. It's like happy and like, everything is connected to that. Darkness represent what? Suffering, failure, death, evil. Okay? So they say there are multiple gods. We say there's only one, and God creates both. Okay. Within that bracha, we have a section, what we call the Kedusha de Yotzer, which is basically the bottom of 93 all the way to the middle of 95. Okay? In that section, we have the two verses that we already know from the Kedusha, i.e. the first pasuk from Isaiah, Kadosh, 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 holy, 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 and the second pasuk from Ezekiel, Baruch Kvod Hashem Imkomo. What are they doing here? Well, a couple of explanations for that. So number one, if you remember, maybe you don't remember, when on Shabbat we discussed the Kedusha, and we said that we actually, during the morning, Shabbat it's a little bit different, but during the day, let's call it, during the day, we recite Kedusha in the Shacharit service. How many times? 3. Okay, one is called Kedusha de Yotzer, right here in the Yotzer Or. One is during the repetition of the Amidah. That's what we call the Kedusha, the regular Kedusha. And the third one is towards the end of the Tfilah, what we call Kedusha de Sidra. Kedusha de Sidra, we're going to discuss at length later on. The Kedusha de Sidra is basically a custom, a later custom. It has to do also with historic reasons and all that kind of stuff. Fine, it's a part of Torah study, but it also like historical circumstances that pushed the Kedusha to be there at the end of the service. Fine. The regular Kedusha, what do we call the regular Kedusha, the one that we recite as part of the repetition of the Amidah. What are we doing there? We start with an opening, right? We start with an opening invitation for Kedusha. What does it mean, Kedusha? To sanctify God's name. So we say, we're going to sanctify God, we're going to sanctify your name here, just like they do that in the heavens. Now, nobody came back from the heaven. Well, some believe that somebody came back. We don't really believe in that. That's a different religion. And so we don't have testimonies what's going on up there. However, we do have two main sources. One is Isaiah and one is Ezekiel. Both have prophecies about what's happening up there. If you spend the time with me learning Sefer Yechezkel, we really dealt with that in depth. But the Yechezkel has a vision. Similarly, Isaiah has even more detailed vision of what's happening. God is on the throne and the angels and the whole thing. And what Isaiah is telling us is that those angels and angelic beings, whatever you want to call them, Tzrafim, the Ofanim, the Chayot, whatever, all those beings, how do they sanctify God's name? By saying, Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzvaot melech kol haaretz kvodo. Okay? Yechezkel, who lived later on, a little bit later, he's already in Bavel giving his prophecies. What does he see? He sees in prophecy, Baruch Kvod Hashem imkomo. He hears that sound, that voice that says, Baruch Kvod Hashem imkomo. That is already after the destruction of the temple, but it really doesn't matter. These are the two psukim that we hear that are, let's call it, words that are recorded, that are heard in the heavens. So what did the rabbis do? They took the two psukim, combined them together, and that is basically the kind of the skeleton of the Kedusha. Okay, so we have an invitation, we have connectors, we have little piyutim, poems that are going to be on Shabbat and holidays between those that expand on the same idea. Now, before the rabbis did that, or during the same time, or whatever, there's also what we call Safuta Echalot. Safuta Echalot is a series of books, articles, call it whatever you want, part of Kabbalah, part of Jewish mysticism, that deals and explain and go in depth to all that stuff is happening there. The angels and this and that, whatever. Not my field. Don't ask me questions about it. I never learned Safuta Echalot. I don't know much about that. I just do know that the piyutim, for example, that we do say on Shabbat and holidays and that kind of stuff is very much influenced by what is written in those books. Okay, those who learn what we call practical Kabbalah also learn those books in depth. Okay, fine. So, bringing it all together. When we recite Kedusha in the repetition of the Amidah, what do we say? Nekadesh Shemcha ba'olam, that's the opening. We will sanctify your name here on earth the way they do it up there in the heavens. The idea is that we mimic what the angels are doing. Therefore, by the way, we're going to go on our tippy toes, right? Why? Because we don't have wings. The description of Isaiah and Yechezkel is that, like, you have those angelic beings and they're stationary, they kind of hover in the air using we can't do that. So the closest that we can is to go on our tippy toes. What? Gravity, right? And we don't have wings. Exactly. So that's what we do in the Kedusha, in the repetition of the Amidah. What we do is we create an experience of what's happening there. What do we do here? And that's called, if you remember, we spoke about that, creation, revelation, and redemption. Past, present, future, all those themes. So that is the revelation. We try to create a revelation by doing what we think that or know that the angels are doing. which brings us to, and that's in the present time. Nekadesh et Shimcha. We're going to do that. We are doing it. Versus what we do here in the Kedusha De'Yotzer. Kedusha De'Yotzer is the past, is the description, is telling what is done. We're not doing it. We're just describing what is done. Okay? And because of that, we have the whole thing from the top of 93. May you be blessed, O rock, King of the Redeemer, creator of holy beings. Okay, so now we're already like, so God created the holy beings, and what do? They stand in the universe heights, proclaiming together in awe aloud the words of the living God, the eternal King. What are those words, by the way? Later on, we're going to say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. So it's all a very lengthy description of what's happening there. They do it with fear, and they do it with their almighty and whatever, and they're all pure, and they're all this, and they're all that. And they open their mouths with sanctity and purity with song, and they glorify, and they bless, and they do, all that kind of stuff. In unison, pure speech and sweet melody, proclaim. Okay, it's a very, very long description to get to the point. What is it that they say? That's the next page on 95. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Continuing the description of Isaiah and Ezekiel, if you take the two descriptions, and I did a class about that once, you take that and you combine that, you see that it's basically that. And then the Ofanim and the holy Chayot, whatever they are, and with a roar of noise, and they also give praise and say, blessed is the Lord's glory from his place. So, we're talking about, what did I start with? This bracha is about the luminaries, the nature, physics, call it whatever you want. The past, call it creation, right? So part of creation is also the angelic beings, all that kind of stuff. And what did they do? They praise God, they sing to God, all that kind of stuff. How did they do it? With Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. So we describe what's happening there. Later on, we're going to have a revelation by mimicking what they're doing. Now we're just describing. And much later in the service, towards the end of Shachrit Kedusha de Sidra, we're going to talk about the Messianic time. We're going to talk about redemption. We're going to talk about future. So this is the past, connected to creation, description. These are the big words that connected to that. Okay, so that's called Kedusha De'Yotzer. Okay. Then after that, there's a transition into the last paragraph, which is the second half of page 95. So it's so we start again. To the blessed God, they offer melodies. We're still with those beings, right? To the King, living, eternal God, who are they? The angels. Okay? Etc., etc., etc. And then we come back into the theme of the luminaries and that kind of stuff. Look, kind of towards the bottom of the page, page 94. Who in his goodness continually renew the work of creation day after day. This is very important because creation, yes, it took place in the past. However, המחדש בטובו בכל יום תמיד. The act of creation continues every day, always. Every day, the fact that the sun rises and we have a day and night is a continuation of the act of creation. And it's not only that. Babies are born, new flowers bloom. That's creation. It continues all the time. Now, something so here we go back to the topic. No, something is up. Okay, so we go back to the topic of renewal, creation. By the way, it has like theological implications because if God continues the act of creation every day, then we're supposed to do that as well, right? By advancing the world. Okay, then here's the interesting thing that there was a lot of discussion about in the rabbinic liturgy. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו. May you make a new light shine over Zion, and may we all soon be worthy of its light. First of all, this is a much later edition. And not in all Sidurim. That's exactly the point. Because it's a new edition, not in all Sidurim. I think that Chabad don't have it. Okay? And that's based on the Sephardic custom. The Sephardic custom, because it's Rav Saadia Gaon, already Sidurei Gaonim also do not have that. So we're talking about much later. It's probably somewhere around the medieval times, probably around that time. So you're not going to see that in Gaonim. You don't even, I think Rambam will not. What is this? First of all, what is this light that we're talking about? And why Zion, Yerushalayim, is stuck there when we talk about creation and nature and all that kind of stuff? You're very close. You're very, very close.
I was thinking something totally different. The light that we say is not the original light. It used to be much brighter.
So you were very close also. Now combine the two of them. So let's go back to the story of creation. Exactly. What is the story of creation? What do we have? Let there be light. By here, okay, so we have light, but then God creates the luminaries, the Shemesh and the Yareach, only on Wednesday. So what kind of light we're talking about? Well, so the rabbi said that it was like a special light, and that light is hidden. In the Messianic times, that light is going to be revealed. Okay, so when we talk about Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir, what light we're referring to? It's that Or HaGanuz, the light that is hidden. Well, if you're not familiar with that, it's going to be a new one. Okay? But look, what did they do with that? What do they do with that though? It's going to shine over what? Zion, Yerushalayim. So here's another example. If you remember when we talked about Ashkivenu, for example, and a bunch of other places on Shabbat, ופורס סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים. Why? Just because. No, just kidding. Because the rabbi said, look, we're in exile, and we need to make all those reminders, constant reminders, that even though we are in exile, we have to remember Yerushalayim. And they were not afraid of the time. That's Moshe Rabbeinu talks about it in the Torah. That's what Moshe is referring to the times, not when times are bad and we're persecuted in exile, but the times that we live in America, in Beverly Hills, and life is good. And why Israel? I have a good life here. Come to the rabbis and say, you got to remember Jerusalem all the time, because fast forward a bunch of generations, yeah, then you could be Jewish, maybe, without Zion. By the way, that's what the beginning of the Reform movement. So we don't want that. We're Germans. We're Jews, but we're Germans. We don't pray for the rebuild of Yerushalayim. In terms of our religion, we're Jews. In terms of our nationality, we're Germans. They didn't go well. But the point is, so the rabbi has already said that. We have a bunch of places. ובני ירושלים ירקות במהרה בימינו, in ברכת המזון. אם אשכחך ירושלים תשכח ימיני, you say it בחופה. ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים, on שבת in השכיבנו. אור חדש על ציון תאיר. Here. So they make all those connections. ממקומך מלכנו תופיע on שבת. בתוך ירושלים עירך לדור ודור ונצח נצחים. It doesn't belong there in the Kedusha. Come the rabbis and they add a piyut that specifically ties all that stuff into Yerushalayim. So Yerushalayim, Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim, whatever. Yerushalayim is a symbol of Eretz Yisrael. And this is yet another example. So we're talking about in the future, and this idea of the future is connected to what? To that hidden light, which is part of redemption. Okay? Okay, which takes us to the next blessing, page 97. One of the call it movement or kind of trajectory that we see is going and getting narrow and more narrow. What am I saying? The Yotzer HaMeorot, that bracha is what? It's nature. Talks about the whole world, talks about the laws of nature, the luminaries, the sun, the moon, whatever, all that kind of stuff. It affects everybody, the entire universe. Okay? Very wide. This coming bracha is going to be much more narrow. We're going to go what? Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael because Am Yisrael is the one that has the Torah. Now you can imagine what's going to happen in the next part. It's going to be what? Nope. Me. Okay? So the whole universe, Am Yisrael, me specifically. The relationship that God has with the whole world, the relationship that God has with Am Yisrael, the unique relationship that I have with God. That's going to be the Shema. Okay? So, because what am I doing in the Shema? I accept the yoke of heaven, me, as an individual. I do that. I can't make you do that. Okay, so you see the direction. Okay. So we say, you have loved us with great love and with compassion. We have, all that kind of stuff because of our history. And what? You taught them stuff. What is that stuff? Torah. Okay, yes. And what we ask? תן בלבנו להבין ולהשכיל לשמוע, ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. Give us, instill in our hearts a desire to understand, to discern, to listen, to learn, to teach, to observe, perform, and fulfill all the teaching of your Torah in love. In other words, philosophical idea, love is wonderful, but love without rules is meaningless. Okay? When people say, I love my children, okay? It's wonderful. Then say no. If you really love them, say no. If you really love them, tell them what is yes and what is no. Teach them. Otherwise, it's meaningless. Okay. Interesting thing that came to my mind. Look at the second line. חמלה גדולה ויתרה חמלת עלינו. חמלה. What is חמלה? חמלה is compassion. There's one person in the whole Tanakh that is described, one person that is described as with that shoresh, with that
That's incorrect.
I'm sorry, in the Torah. You're in Tanakh, you're right. Vayachmol Shaul al Agag, you're absolutely correct. Somebody in the Torah, the only person in the Torah that is described by that shoresh, exactly, Bat Paro, the daughter of Pharaoh. ותחמול עליו, ותראהו את הילד. And what does it mean? It means that something that is clean, something that has no string attached. It's pure. Okay? And that's exactly what we say, that God, you have this compassion towards us, regardless to what we're going to do, regardless to whether we're worthy or not. You want to understand why? Okay, etc. Okay, one of the interesting things is, let's break it. There are a lot of verbs there in the middle of the page. להבין, להשכיל, לשמוע, ללמוד, ללמד, לשמור, לעשות ולקיים. What is the difference between them? So להבין, it's understanding in theory the issues of the Torah. It's Torah study, but understanding, like, the concept. What is להשכיל? Means that I could carry out what I've learned in theory. Okay? Lishmoa, listen to the teachers from whom I could learn more. Okay, so it's not what I learn by myself, independent study, it's also what I learn from others. Lilmod means to review what I learn until it becomes part of my knowledge, part of my practice. Lelamed, teaching or sharing our knowledge with others. Lishmo, guarding or review the knowledge so it's not lost. La'asot, to perform, to carry out what I've learned. Ulekayem is to fulfill the commandments in a meaningful way, that the practice is meaningful. And that is what we're asking God. It's not enough for us to know. It's not enough that we're going to learn. It's not enough that we perform the mitzvot. We want to do it in a meaningful way. We want to do it out of knowledge, and we want to, in the process, to educate others, and we want to learn from others, and we want to review it so it becomes part of our practice. Okay? Good. Obviously, there's like a whole reference here also to Israel. Gather us from the four corners of the earth, and lead us upright to our land. Interesting discussion in the last, 70, 80 years or so. If you live in Israel, what should you say? I'm already there. I already live in Israel. What? Okay, so period. Why to our land? I'm already in the land.
Maybe it'll be a different.
There is no different land. No, the land of Israel is the land of Israel.
But in a different time, it's going to be.
No, but this is the very specific land, to our land. So it's a debate. On one hand, there's like one group that says, listen, that's the way it's written. We still, yes, we live in Eretz Israel. However, redemption has not yet arrived. And therefore, we're not truly there yet. Yes, maybe physically we're there, but spiritually we're not there, and it's okay to say that. A different approach is replacing the lamed with a bet. And that's what a lot of, especially the Israeli editions do. Let us walk upright in our land, not to our land, in our land. That's the way I grew up. In Israel. When I came here, I switched. And God willing, when we all moved to Israel, we switched back. But these are like, the little things that you want to say that, you want to say the truth.
Obviously, this was written.
Of course. No, but it's actually the truth. It's interesting because the two versions are extremely old. Right, and we know there was always a group of Jews in Israel. So it's not that those who say Be'artzen is something new out of nothing. It's probably based on a much older tradition. I don't know, maybe if it's in the Jerusalem Talmud. But the idea is that we do have to look at our tefillot and evaluate all the time. Are we saying something that we really mean? Do we really want that?
To have wings, it means not just me, but others too.
I get it. But it's us that includes me, which is fine. Gather us from the whole corners of the earth. I can say that while I'm in Israel. That's fine. But you can't tell me to walk upright to Israel when I'm already in Israel. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
Even if it's right, it's like still the meaning.
Huh.
So say betolichem, and by the way, that's one of the suggestions. Some of the people say, very, very few. Betolichem komemiyut la'artzenu. Okay, which brings us to the Shema. Okay. The Shema itself, next page, 99. So the Shema, why do we have that? Why do we have that here? The mitzvah of reciting the Shema is what we call a mitzvah deoraita, a Torah level mitzvah, and it's a separate mitzvah from tefillah. And indeed, originally, and we see it from description of the Mishnah, tefillah is referred to as the Amidah. This is what tefillah. Shema is a kriyat Shema. Every person is obligated to recite the Shema when they lie down and when they wake up in the morning, twice. And that's an independent mitzvah. Come the rabbi and they say, oh, schlepping to shul, it's already tough. Let's make it easy for you. We're going to do that kind of together into one service. Oh, you need to be in the right mindset. Let's create a preparation, that's psukei de zimra, etc., etc. And this is how you start to see like the whole thing. But originally, these are two different units, right? But there were two independent mitzvot. One is tefillah, you need to daven, and one is kriyat shema. And for example, we have, even if you look at the halachic times, right? If you look at the halachic, there's a different time for kriyat shema and different time for reciting the Amidah. And what do you do, for example, if you are, right? So some of the stuff you can already, it's either end, like, if it's like too early or too late. So you can do that, but not that. You can do that, but not that. Okay? The Mishnah is talking about, for example, the poalim, the workers, or the umanin, the craftsmen. Thank you. That work long hours, start sometimes very early, before you can even daven. And they say, Kore kriyat shema, echan shenimtza. Even on the way, even if you walk, even if you're like, okay, so make it to our life. You're in the car, hopefully not driving, and it's time to recite the Shema. Say it.
But this week, you just changed the.
Correct. It's a big problem. It's a big problem, especially for me, David, who davened the 6 a.m. minyan. Okay, so there's like ways to walk around that. There are ways around, but yes. So it's an independent mitzvah. You're supposed to read the Shema when you wake up and when you lie down. Basically, that is supposed to be somewhat equivalent to sunrise and sunset. Back then, and before electricity, people got up with a rooster and went to sleep. Nightfall. Okay, next. The rabbis tell us that there's a real obligation. The real part of the obligation is the first pasuk. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. You need to have a kavanah. You need to have focus. Okay. This is not tefillah. We got to be clear about that. This is a declaration. This is the foundation of belief upon which tefillah is based. And this is why tefillah is going to come later. And this is why we have this idea of juxtaposing tefillah legeula, redemption to tefillah. Why it's that? Because geula, redemption, is the blessing after the Shema, and it has to be connected to tefillah, to the Amidah. Has to be, we can't have an interruption. Why? Because it all stems from this. It's the foundation of my belief. There were. But I'm saying that the rabbis later on put it together.
But would it be wrong to accept it?
Under particular circumstances, no. So for example, if you are you're in a bind and whatever or something like that, then yeah, then you separate them. But we try not to separate. Okay. Um, let's assume that you daven and it's too early to daven the Amidah. You came to the Amidah, then you're gonna wait. Okay, let's assume that you go on a road trip and you started driving at 4 o'clock in the morning. And all of a sudden, sunrise, you should say the Shema in its proper time. Even if you're not davening at that point, let's assume that you're going to be davening like later on, there's a place to stop or whatever, and you're going to daven there. You should say the Shema. And we, if you remember in the very beginning, we have the early Shema. Why do we do that? Because that was the original time where people recited it. When we start davening, especially on Shabbat at 9 o'clock, not to mention places that start at 10 o'clock, it's way, way after what? 10:30. Wow. Okay. So that is way after sunrise. Let's put it this way. Okay, it's way after sunrise. So the rabbi said, you know what? You're going to go to a late minyan. I get it. That's fine. I get the social aspect and all that kind of circumstances or whatever, that kind of stuff. But at least, so say the Shema again, you say it at home before tefillah. Okay, this is where it comes from. Okay, so the first pasuk, the halacha is that you need to have focus. You need to understand what you're saying. You need to, and it's Kabbalat ol malchut shamayim, accepting the yoke of heaven. Okay, and there's also a parallel structure that between the first paragraph, ve'ahavta, to the ahava rabba, right? Both of the idea of love. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That is like what we look at the truth, the absolute truth, just like the sun rises in the morning, etc. So there's this parallel to the first blessing of the Shema, second blessing of the Shema. Later on, it's going to be V'hayim Shamoah. That's understanding. That's Sachar Be'onesh. We're going to talk about that. But even before the Shema, you see that El Melech Ne'eman. What is El Melech Ne'eman? Okay, so why do we have that? Okay, okay, so this is El Melech Ne'eman in Gematria. This is 248. Oh yeah, we'll get there. But El Melech Ne'eman, just that line is 248. 248 that we have parts of our body, organs, and it's also 248 of positive commandments. So that means the Shema, when you perform the Shema, you have to do it with B'chol me'odecha. You do it with all your might. You do it in a total way with all your organs. Okay? And it means that I accept upon myself all the mitzvot. That's what it means. So, if I'm going to go this way, in this little bit more philosophic way, this idea of my physical existence, what is the purpose of that? Fulfilling the mitzvot. That's basically the idea here. Okay. The total number in the three parshiot, in the three sections of the Shema, is total number of words, 245. And what happens at the end of the recitation of the Shema? Look at the very bottom of page 101. The Chazan repeats, Hashem Elokechem Emet, 3 more words. That means back to the 248. Okay, now another flip idea of that. Okay, so I have 245. What if I'm not davening in the minyan? Then I'm stuck with the 245. Oh, not really. El Melech Ne'eman, 3 words, put me back in the 248. No, you don't say it in the minyan, El Melech Ne'eman. You say it only when you're alone. Oh. Okay. Okay. Maybe I should clarify. You say El Melech Ne'eman only when you daven alone. And you repeat Hashem Elokechem Emet only in the minyan. So either way, you make it to the 248. Okay. Also here in the Koran, you see that the Shema, the Ain, a lot of drashot, a lot of stuff about that stuff. Correct. You see the Ain is bigger, and also the Dalet of Echad is also bigger. And that's in the Torah. The Torah scroll is going to be bigger. And the idea is what? What is Ed? Ain and Dalet together is Ed is a witness. Because it means that each person that recites the Shema is a witness, basically giving a testimony of what Achdut Hashem, the unity of God. It's a declaration to the entire world about the unity of God. Now, what is Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed? No. That's a midrash, correct. That's a midrash. The midrash says that at the time Parashat Vayechi, that I'm sorry, not Parashat Vayechi, Parashat Vayigash, when there's that meeting in Vayechi, right? Yeah. So anyway, that's a midrash that said that the Yaakov said Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Okay, fine. But what is from our liturgy? What is that basically? Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. It's Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach La'olam U'La'olam Maya. It's the same thing. This is Aramaic. This is Hebrew. Okay, it's the same thing. Interesting fact. So the second paragraph of the Shema, Vayayim Shamot Yishmeu, talks about what? Reward and punishment. Reform movement, by the way, do not believe in that concept in Judaism, and therefore this parashiyah, that section, is omitted from the Shema in all Reform Sidurim. Fast forward, let's go to the third paragraph for a second. The third paragraph is Parashat Tzitzit. Okay, so Parashat Tzitzit, there's a lot of stuff there. Like, if you look at the ties and the whatever of the strings of the tzitzit, all that kind of stuff, you can come up to the number 613, because you have strings and each string is 2. There's the 8, 2, and then the ties or whatever. Okay, whatever. But basically the idea is that mitzvah tzitzit, when I look at the tzitzit, I'm looking at the pshat though. By looking at the tzitzit, I remember all of the mitzvot, and I should do them. So what is it, the purpose of having tzitzit? Right? When you walk when you walk with a kippah on the street, it's a reminder, mainly for yourself. Hey, behave. Right? Same goes for the tzitzit. This is, by the way, this is the major machlok. Like, originally the practice is the tzitzit, if it's uri temoto, is to be outside. A lot of people wear the tzitzit. What? Not all Chassidim. In Israel, it's much more popular that even not Chassidim wear the tzitzit outside, because you have to see it all the time. The only reason why we started putting the tzitzit inside is because we live in diaspora, and it's dangerous. It becomes more and more popular because of Israeli influence. Mainly because, but like the practice in Chutz La'aretz was, you put it in because otherwise it's dangerous.
Dangerous in some neighborhoods around here.
Correct. But I'm saying, even like, so think 400 or 500 years ago in Europe, same for the kippah. Okay. But the kippah is not a mitzvah. It's a minhag.
don't have to remember anything?
No, women don't need a reminder. They got it. We do, because we're distracted. You're focused. Okay. So, and what is the purpose? The purpose that I'll do the mitzvot, and by doing the mitzvot, I'm not going to do anything wrong. Right? Because if I don't do the mitzvot, I'm going to do stupid things, the wrong things. And if I remember God and I perform the mitzvot, then I become V'item kedoshim leLoechem. I become kadosh. Right? אני השם אלוקיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני השם אלוקיכם. What's the connection to יציאת מצרים? God says, I took you out of Egypt for a purpose. For a purpose. Not to have freedom. What does it mean, freedom? Freedom, it means for a purpose. The purpose is that you will be holy. How you become holy? By performing the mitzvot. How do you remember to perform the mitzvot? Look at the tzitzit. In this particular section, there's like other ways. Okay? What's the idea with the tchelet? Okay. So the tchelet, the blue string, we're not going to get into all this fascinating thing by itself. Maybe we'll discuss it at some point if you want. But the blue reminds us of the ocean. The ocean reminds us of the sky. The sky reminds us of Hashem. Okay? So again, it's a, how you call it, training wheels. In a perfect world, we don't need all that stuff. In a perfect world, we remember everything we need to do. And we remember that God is watching us all the time and expects us to be holy. But in reality, we're distracted. So we need to have reminders. Okay? Interestingly, and with that, I'm going to end today. We spoke about the Reform movement. So if you look at the Reform Sidur, also Parashat Tzitzit is also omitted, and they pick it up only towards the end. Leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitim kedushim le'Elohechem. Only the last two psukim of that section is there. Why? That has to do with historic reasons. So, as you know, if you don't know, why am I saying as you know? The main service in Reform movement is Friday night. It's not Shabbat morning, it's Friday night. It has to do with historic reasons. People came to America in the 40s and the 30s and whatever. You had to work on Shabbat morning. If you didn't come to work, you didn't have a job on Monday. So what happened was people didn't come to shul. They had to go to work. And because of that, the Reform movement, so one of the solutions were the Hashkama Minyanim. This is the beginning of the Hashkama Minyanim. Let's do a super early Minyanim, 5, 6 a.m. You finish your work. I know it's not ideal, but you need to make a living, so whatever. That's what you do. You finish your davening and you go to work. This is how the Hashkama Minyanim started. The Reform had a different approach. They said, we get it. What we're going to do is we're going to make the main service the Friday night service. And if and what does it mean? It means I'm going to take elements from the morning service and put them in the Friday night service. So, for example, even today, majority of Reform congregations will have Torah reading on Friday night.
So which parsha are they reading?
Same parsha. They have a different cycle. They have the triennial cycle. The triennial cycle means that you don't finish the whole Torah every year, but you finish the whole Torah every 3+ years. It's not their invention. That was the custom in Eretz Israel. That was the difference between the Jerusalem Talmud and the Babylonian Talmud. The idea of finishing the whole Torah in 1 year is based on the custom of Bavel. It's in the Talmud. And Simchat Torah is a holiday that was invented in Bavel. So it started with Reform, and later on conservative Judaism also adopted, most places, not everything, adopted the triennial cycle, where every week you read only 1/3 of the parsha. So in year 1, it's the first third. In year 2, it's the second third. So it's the same parsha as ours, but it's not the entire parsha. It's 1/3 of the parsha. So they started adopting that early custom that appears already in the Jerusalem Talmud. We call it Minhag Eretz Israel. Why? For practical reasons. Torah reading is long, it's boring. Most people don't understand that. Let's make it much shorter. Okay, so this is where it comes from. This is the parsha. However, they started taking elements from the morning, moving them to the evening. Now, in the evening service, most people, except for the Chazan actually, nobody wears a talit. Why? Because talit is what we call a beged yom. Right? Talit, just like the regular garments, like, whatever, we're obligated to put a tzitziot or tzitzit, the tassels, on a 4-corner garment. Today, we don't wear those, right? Unless you wear a galabia, I guess, like whatever, or we don't wear that. So there's no obligation to wear such garment. However, the rabbi said, I don't want that mitzvah to be forgotten, and therefore the tzitzit that we wear undershirt or the talit was invented. A specific garment that was created specifically so when we put tzitzit, so we're not going to forget that mitzvah. Fine. But that's what we call a beged yom. This is what you wear during the day. We don't wear that at night, because at night we don't wear regular clothes. We wear pajamas. Well, today, actually, at least in my kids' school, like every week they have like pajama day also. Like, I don't get it, but whatever. I know they wear pajamas like, during the day. It drives me crazy. Okay, yeah. So point being, if I'm not, listen to that logic. If I'm not wearing a talit because it's an evening service, then I don't need Parashat Tzitzit because it does not apply. It applies only to the morning. So I'm going to cut Parashat Tzitzit. I'm going to start with Leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai. So you will remember all the mitzvot, and this is like the punchline. So yes, remember the mitzvot, but you don't need this idea of the talit because I'm in the evening. That was the rationale of that, and this is how the Reform practice has evolved not to have. Now, later on, it became such a standard that even in the morning, most places don't recite it, even though if they wear a talit, and even in the places that wear a talit in evening, which a lot of the Reform congregations, they still don't recite it because people are not familiar with that. A couple of generations later, it completely disappeared from the liturgy. So that's what happened.
Because you wear tzitzit.
The month is going. I understand. I get it.
So the mind what?
No, Lemant is Kiru. So you will remember. Exactly. I get it. You get it. Let's call it tradition. It's like, Nikki, David, good to see you. Next week, we're not going to meet.
Oh, no.
Okay, we're taking a break for 1 week. Okay, I'm going to be thinking about you when I'm in Israel.
We'll miss you.
Okay, see you in 2 weeks.